Live from New York, this is Spirit Matters. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome, everybody, to our daily podcast. So glad that you are here. My name is Dal Grunga, and I'm joined by Kishore Chandra, Achyuta Gopi, our live studio audience, and whoever you are listening out there, we're glad that you're here. How are we doing today? How are we doing this morning?
We're here.
We're here.
We're doing it.
We're doing it. That's what we got, guys. That's what we got. Any updates, announcements, things people should know about? No.
This Sunday.
This Sunday.
Yeah. Normally it would be the Bhagavat Shravan program
Mm-hmm.
from 11 to 1, but this Sunday it's going to be a special version. We are going to be celebrating the commemoration of the wedding of Tulsi and Shalagram.
Tulsi and Shalagram. Hare Krishna. So if you're in New York City, which most of you aren't, but if you are, some of you I know are. Sundarananda's in the area, and who knows who's listening out there.
We have some Jerseyites. So
we have some what?
Jerseyites.
We have some Jerseyites. We love you too. And so come to the Bhakti Center, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
11
You can
o'clock.
come as early as 10:45.
You can come as early as 10:45. Okay. And what are we doing today? We're looking at the Bhagavad Gita. If you're new to our show here, we read the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which, by the way, December 3rd, Gita Jayanti. We're doing a Gita Yajna. We're just in the midst of planning. We haven't announced it yet. The Gita Jayanti is on December 3rd. It's a Saturday, the celebration of the day the Gita was spoken.
Beautiful.
We don't have Yashika here. We have a listener that's tuning in from Kurukshetra. At least that's what she's telling me. You just believe anything. I don't even know where any of you guys are from. Dana Kay is from Florida. I don't know that. She just told me that. Pasha's in Seattle. She could be lying. You don't know where anybody really is, but we believe people. We believe people when they tell us stuff. And Yashika told me that she's in Kurukshetra.
I don't know if I'd tell everybody where I was if I was on this podcast with millions of unknown people.
Really? Well, good thing that they're lying.
You see, this could be like a security measure.
All right. We're in reading the Bhagavad Gita. Where are we?
We had left off. We went back and we were talking about texts 62 and 63. And
Text 62 and 63.
Watching them. But I also was wondering, because we got a really cool question.
Oh, yeah.
One of our chats, which I feel like this is kind of what this is for now. And it was about like mechanical devotion and mechanical chanting. How do we re-enliven ourselves, re-enthuse ourselves? Like what helps us? Have we ever experienced it even? So I thought it would be really nice and very cool to try and delve into that maybe a little bit. And
that's a great idea.
it's about what helps us.
That's why you're on this podcast. You have great ideas. We have a WhatsApp chat. We have an email you can write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. You can write to us if you want to get on our WhatsApp chat. And somebody asked this beautiful question: what do y'all do when you're feeling mechanical in your sadhana, in your spiritual practice? What do you do when you're feeling uninspired or even frustrated with your sadhana? If it's a new word for you, sadhana just means a regulated spiritual practice. I'm going to read 10 minutes a day. I'm going to wake up at this time every day. I'm going to do my meditation. I'm going to do, the sort of spiritual discipline that you try to set for yourself, which some days go really, really good. And I feel great. And I feel like I'm just on my way back to the spiritual world. And some days I feel like going backwards. And we put pressure. I was speaking with somebody, Mahatma Prabhu was in town, and he was saying that when you join like a spiritual movement or a spiritual practice, he said all of a sudden you have so many more things to feel guilty about. Because or anything you do, like, they say that 12 steps or AA ruins your bad habits, because now you know better. And so it's like, now I have this idea of what it means to be a quote unquote good person. And there's pressure that we put on ourselves. Ishika's coming in, guys. I'm letting her in the Zoom room. Arkut Kshetra Dambasi. Done. All right, so that's the question. That's the setup. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Mhm.
For me, I try and immediately find the joy. Um,
Mm,
there are times when I'm feeling super frustrated in my spiritual life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, have I been joyfully performing, or have I just been going through the motions? Have I lost the
mm,
joy? That's a problem. Like we should be finding happiness in this process. And if I'm not finding the happiness or the joy in the process, I start to look for why.
mm,
I also start to focus on where I tell myself I just don't have time. Am I investing into so many other things, people, etc., and still just constantly just kind of turning a blind eye to myself?
mm,
Because this japa ultimately, it's to help me. It is for me. Yes, it will endear me to Krishna. It'll bring me closer to Krishna, but those are already his names. He already knows his
mm,
names. This japa and this practice is supposed to be helping me. It is
mm,
supposed to be a self-care time in the biggest sense of the self with a capital S. And we're trying to get to a place where we are understanding more about the self. And so where am I telling myself automatically right off the bat, I just don't have time for this? Where am I investing my time and my attention and my energy? And taking a hard look at that and understanding where I'm draining myself instead of refilling my cup tends to help me put things into perspective. And then I start trying to find the joy again.
So where are you telling yourself I don't have time for something? Where are you draining yourself? And where am I finding joy? Those are three questions I heard from you.
Yeah.
Where
Mm.
am I finding joy? Um, makes sense in that where am I finding joy? Meaning, like, am I finding the joy in it? And I think part of the question is like, what if I'm not finding joy in the things that are supposed to be bringing me joy? Like, this is my meditation, or like, can we dig into that a little bit more for you? Because sometimes it's like, if it feels good, do it. And then what happens is, where's the discipline part of it, of like, I do it when I feel like it, I do it when I don't feel like it. So can you dig into that a little bit more for me?
Well, for me, where am I finding joy? It's like, where am I finding joy in my spiritual practices? There are sometimes there are places where you just feel like, what, just meditation just doesn't bring me joy. It's not bringing me joy, and I'm trying to figure out. My goal is to figure out, well, why? Because
Mm,
there are people who are experiencing things within these names that when I look at them, you see it, you feel it. And I start to feel like, well, I want to figure out what that is. Well, what have they done? They've read, they've gotten to know our best friend, they've gotten to figure out who that supreme person is. And so if I'm looking at my meditation and I'm thinking this is not bringing me any joy, then I start looking for the joy. Well, then what does bring me joy? Well,
mm,
reading often will bring me joy. It'll bring me back to the sweeter things in Krishna consciousness. And so, even if it's something I've read a million times, I'll go and pick up some of my favorite spiritual literatures, some of my
mm,
favorite books, some of my trusted spiritual teachers. I'll go and I'll find a lecture that is a pick me up. I try and look for those things that are joy giving within my spiritual practice to
mm,
reinvigorate me again.
mm,
I agree with you, and I really specifically think you were mentioning about like the other people who are finding joy, like the other practitioners who are finding joy in the practice. And for me, that was kind of the first thing that came up. It's like, bhakti is not a practice that is done in isolation. It's something that is done in shared community. the kirtan is supposed to be together with others. You know, we're supposed to come together and chant the names of Krishna. And I think japa is so interesting, or chanting, right, softly to yourself is so interesting, because sometimes it can be seen as like this solitary practice where I'm just in my like little bhajan kutir hut, like removed from society, just by myself. And it's like, when you think about it, it's like all of those swamis that were like very advanced, like, yeah, they were doing that, but I'm not that advanced. So if I go into a room by myself for like years and I'm just there chanting by myself, I'm probably not going to get the same, you know, it's not going to go the same way as these swamis. And I really, the reason I bring this up is just because that topic of association, of like, who am I surrounding myself with, is super duper important, I think, because if I'm noticing that I have no taste, or I'm noticing that like my japa is off, or my spiritual practices are off, or whatever, you know, it begs the question to ask oneself, like you were saying in Chuta, of like, you know, where's the joy? Where am I finding this, etc. But I also think like it begs the question to ask oneself of like, where am I, like, who are my peers, and what am I hearing, and you know, who am I surrounding myself with? Is there enthusiasm and inspiration around my sangha, you know, the sangha that I'm around? Because if there's not, and we're not even talking about these things, you know, it's very hush hush, it can turn into a mechanical process, because, you know, I've heard from so many people, sometimes even bringing up this question feels like an affront. It's like, you know, people won't admit it. Yeah, my job is not going so well, or yeah, my spiritual life is not going so well, because there's some stigma around that, you know. Sometimes there's a false expectation that people uphold of like, this is what spirituality is supposed to look like, and I'm just supposed to be spiritual and chant and be happy, Hare Krishna, everyone's happy all the time. And it's like, you know, that leaves very little room for like, well, actually I'm going through it, or actually, you know, I'm having all these internal turmoils. I need someone to talk to about the struggles that I'm going through with my practices or whatever. And so I think sangha is really important. I think hearing is super important. Who am I hearing from, and is it inspiring? I remember I spoke to Radhanath Swami recently, and I love him so much because his answers are always so simple. And I was just like, you know, Maharaj, I'm feeling uninspired. And he immediately was like, okay, so then do something inspiring. And I was like, yes, that's a good idea.
Sure.
I was like, great. And more specifically, he was like,
Would you like to do that together, Maharaj?
I know, right? More specifically, he was like, be around people that inspire you. And I was like, yes, you know, and I really, really have taken that of like, okay, be around people that are helping me go deeper into my bhakti, that are helping me go deeper into my spiritual life. And last thing I'll say, because I'm ranting, you know, you're supposed to, in relationship with people in this spiritual life, there are naturally going to be people that are kind of around the same level as you, your peers, who you're kind of like joking and whatever, and you know, have this camaraderie with. You have people that are perhaps you're taking them under your wing, you know, and you're kind of like mentoring them, or they just came into this process of bhakti. And then you have people that are above you, that have been doing this for a very long time, the swamis, the teachers, the gurus. And it's really important to have a healthy balance of all of those three, because teaching is really, you know, I have a friend who, well, our friend Jai Jagannath, he would always say teaching is so important, actually, because that's when you really learn, when you're kind of put in a position of like, I have to speak this in a way that people will understand. And then this relationship that we have, you know, coming together as friends, as peers, is super important. But I think the last one gets overlooked a lot. It's like, who am I receiving from? Like, who am I actually hearing and receiving from? Okay, rant over.
No rants. Good stuff. Good stuff. What I'm hearing from you guys that I love is that one thing I'm also taking away is that it, like, I'm an all or nothing person very often. Like, if you know me, it's like, okay, I'm gonna get my life together. Here I go. And it's just like full on like military plan of like all the things I'm gonna do that infuse inspiration into my life, as opposed to just taking a simple small step. You know, like, find something, even if it's 5 minutes of, like, I was speaking with Keshav Swami from London a while back, and talking about this very thing about like how to, like, sometimes you just need something that's going to like re-enter you into the cycle of inspiration again, and it just mean like what's almost like an on-ramp, like what's the easy on-ramp that's going to get you back into some spiritual inspiration. And it might be, somebody wrote in the chat here that they watched little baby Krishna, which is a Nickelodeon version of Krishna stories that is broadcast in India. It's, um, and so you can like just find something that's, whether it's reading something, watching something, talking to somebody, like it doesn't even have to be in the realm of like my daily discipline sadhana, but just something, even if it's like something that doesn't even seem directly spiritual, something like, you know, that you enjoy doing, that is in the mode of goodness, that lifts you up a little bit, that kind of puts, because sometimes we just need to like lift ourselves out of a down energy. It's like I'm a little bit in a cloud and I need something that's just kind of like spark me up a little bit out of that. And then that will kind of like change the way that I'm approaching things, and make me a little bit more excited to get into spiritual practice. And so that was one question. Where do you find joy? But there were two other questions that you brought up, and I wanted to you said, where am I telling myself I don't have time? Could you dig into that one a little bit more? Like, where am I, like, if I'm telling myself I don't have time for something, like, what are the things I'm telling myself I don't have time for? Like creating that list and then questioning whether or not you really have time for it.
Yeah, especially spiritually. I feel like when we get busy in life, our sadhana is the first thing to go. It's like the first thing to go. It's
Mm,
like, I don't have time for that. I have to do every other responsibility. And more often than not, those responsibilities are not even things we can take with us if this life were to be over tomorrow.
mm,
And so I often, when I have like one-on-one conversations and sessions with people, I'm asking them, I'm like, well, you've spent all of this time investing in whatever business, job, etc., but have you invested in yourself?
mm,
And usually the answer is like, well, yeah, this is my investment in myself because it's going to make me happy. And I'm like, but you're not happy.
mm.
So it's not making you happy. So are we investing in the spiritual practices, actually believing that they are important, essential for our lives, and that they actually will bring happiness? Do we believe yet?
That is such a great question. And thank you for clarifying that. Like, when things get pinched, what are the things that immediately get tossed to the wayside? And a lot of times I think that things get tossed to the wayside, not even intentionally. It's just like subconsciously, unintentionally, something just drops to the wayside. And I realize like, oh yeah, I discard things that are actually like a great exercise you can do is listing out all the things that are important to you, and prioritize and list them in order of importance. Like, what's most important to you in your life, and then list all those things out, and then just do a simple audit of how you spend your time, you know just like, not like how you'd like to spend your time, how you plan to spend your time, like how you do spend your time. Like, imagine if you just gathered all the receipts of everything that you spent, and just like, where am I spending my money? And if I use my time as that same sort of commodity or same sort of currency, I'm like, where are the seconds and the hours going? And then just looking at it and then just measuring it up, like, well, okay, I think and feel this is the most important thing to me, but this isn't where my time is going. And or when time does get busy, why is it that the thing that's at the top of the list is the first to go and get squeezed out of my schedule? you know and so I think it's important for me to know, like, what are the things that I easily discard from my schedule, um even though I tell myself they're really important. And I guess that the takeaway is just to notice that, just to be aware, and then ask myself, like, am I willing to stop discarding? Is there something else I can discard
Yeah,
rather than that thing which is actually so important?
we often feel as though, like you said, it has to be all or nothing. But I'm often telling people, I'm like, one round is enough. If that's legitimately all you've got, one round is enough. It's okay. And so there is this aspect of guilt and shame, because it's like, well, if that was the model of good people, then if I'm not doing that, then the only other model is bad people. And I love to quote the verse that Sri Krishna says, in this endeavor, there's no loss, no diminution. One round can be enough. Sometimes you're at that place where all you've got that day is one round. There are some days where you are legitimately busy. And then there are some days where I just tell myself, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy, and I'm so busy, and I'm so busy. And when I really look at it, I might have spent 20 minutes scrolling online. And that could have been 20 minutes where I allowed my mind to calm down, where I just turned off my mind for a little bit and chanted the holy name. Those could have been 20 minutes. Like, why does it have to be that, okay, well, I'll chant when I'm put into a situation where, well, I guess I have nothing else to do. So, so I wanted to stop looking at my chanting as this, like, well, I'll do it if I have nothing else. Especially if it's supposed to be, if I'm telling myself that it's a priority, if I have promised to make it a priority. And I just started looking at it. Sachinandan Maharaj brought up a really beautiful point. He said, we put so much emphasis on replying to certain emails. We know if I don't reply to that person, they're going to be upset. You put a priority on it. You will remind yourself and put reminders, and then you respond to that email, and then you're emailing back and forth. And he said, but how often do we say, okay, I have to make it a priority to respond to Krishna? How often do we view our chanting as actually showing up for Krishna? So because I love relationships, I really tend to look at it. Did I call my friend? Did I speak to my friend? Did I respond to that email? Or was I busy doing everything else that I didn't have even 7 minutes maybe to respond to my best friend?
Sure, what's on your mind?
I think it's interesting because when we talk about like time and having time or not having time, a lot of people, especially in big cities like New York, and Baldevi was speaking about how like trying to do everything all at once, it's exhausting. And I've been really thinking about this word exhaustion, and like when we feel exhausted. And I remember reading somewhere or someone telling me, I can't remember where I saw it, if it was like online but it rang very true to me that like exhaustion is very different than like physical tiredness. Physical tiredness is like my body is tired and therefore I can go to sleep, I can wake up, it's okay, it's fine. I used my body a lot today, etc. And the post or whatever it was, I can't remember, was saying that exhaustion tends to indicate that something deeper is going on, that something is misaligned, that something is not, to use this language that Achyuta's using, which I really like, that something's not bringing you joy, right? That something is not quite right in your daily life. And there's so, if you think about it, there's so many things that we do in the name of relaxation that are actually like extremely exhausting, and we don't see that because we're turning our minds off to binge watch the thing or to like doom scroll on our, Instagram or like whatever. And that's actually like exhausting in so many levels, like on a physical level, on a mental level. And I think it's like a real internal shift that needs to happen. I'm making it happen. I'm trying to make it happen, of like, actually that's the stuff that's making me exhausted, and this, my practice, which I've committed to, I think sometimes there's like a mental block around it of like, oh, like that's and it's like, no, that's actually going to take me out of the exhaustion. I'm not straining my eyes, I'm not receiving all these like terrible messages of the world. Like, this is something that's going to take me out of that exhaustion. And it's almost like a flip needs to happen in a sense. What are you thinking, Doya?
I'm thinking so much. I've seen that quote a couple of times. The idea of like there's a difference between tired and being exhausted. And like if I'm exhausted, it may not necessarily mean that I need more rest. It just means I need something that's more inspiring in my life. And I always go back and think about, you know, this phrase came up at least once, you know, chant and be happy. Srila Prabhupada would share chant and be happy, and how there are multiple ways of looking at that statement, that chant and be happy can be chant, like sing the holy names of the Lord, do your spiritual practice, and as a result of that, be happy, which leads us to think like, if I'm not happy, I'm doing something wrong. Or that, you know, what if I'm not happy and then I should give it up or whatever. Um, and that's, I think, where the struggle is. It's like, I'm doing this, but you know, I'm not experiencing perpetual bliss. Um, then there's also seeing it as two different instructions. Like one is to chant, one is to do your japa, to do your sadhana, and the other one is to be happy. Like take that as a service, like as an instruction to be happy in my life. Because if I'm not happy, if I don't have a baseline of happiness, and I think as devotees we have an understanding that be happy doesn't just mean like go for it in the material world and indulge in just like splurging, because we know, because we have a sense of what actually, because I think you mentioned this many times, Achuta, today, is like, is this actually recharging me? Am I actually feeling happy as a result of like, you know, whatever it is I just binged, watched, or ate, or did, you know what I mean? Like at the end of it, you know, we get to this, but I think Kishore was saying this, I think last Tuesday when Kishore was leading Tuesday Night Kirtan, he was like, we get to this place where we're asking this question, what have I done? You know, like what have I just done? I thought this was going to make me happy. I just feel bloated. And so I think that to understand what it really, having a mature, evolved idea of what it means to be happy, but to make sure that like there's a baseline of happiness in my life, which may come from spiritual activities and may just come from the material needs of my body and mind that I could satisfy in a responsible way, so that I feel nourished enough to approach my spiritual life in a from a place that's sustainable. And I think we have a hard time drawing that line because we feel guilty sometimes for being happy, because we think that suffering is the currency towards spiritual advancement, or we think that there's so much suffering in the world, what right do I have to be happy about anything? And so we have this difficulty allowing ourselves, or we're just dealing with childhood trauma and neglect and whatever it is, and we have trouble with like self-worth. And so like the idea that like I'm allowed to be happy, and not only me allowed to be happy, but I should find ways to be happy, it's a good thing. And if I don't have that, it's going to be really hard. Like Prabhupada once said, or there was a story that I don't know if they were in a museum or something and looking at art. And Prabhupada said, you can't speak philosophy to a starving person, can't appreciate art. You know, you can't speak philosophy to a hungry man or woman. And so I think that there's an idea of like, what are my base needs? You know, and let me not fool myself by thinking I just need to chant and do kirtan and read spiritual literature, and that's all that I need. I mean, in one sense, that's all the soul needs, but I'm a spirit soul encased in a very complex material body and mind. And if I neglect that equation, it gets sticky, and I find myself in this place of like, well, maybe this isn't for me. When actually it is for me, it's for everybody. I just have to find mature ways of balancing it all out. So that's what I'm taking home. And unless there's any burning thoughts, it's our time to turn to Kimberly. It's our time to turn to Kimberly, who's our taker awayer, and is going to give us some takeaways. If anybody else has some takeaways, I know our chat's got a lot going on. And what do you got for us, Kimberly?
Thank you. So today we're taking away to find joy in the process and be around people that inspire you. Gather the receipt and be aware of where our time is going, and to make it a responsibility to respond to Krishna's email and call.
Ooh. Krishna108 at is Gmail. Does Krishna use Gmail? What would he use at Krishna.com? Krishna at Krishna.com. Is that the store?
The Gmail can be Golokomail. It's fine.
Golokomail. Krishna at golokomail.com.org. Okay. Any final words from Kishore or Chuta?
Find your joy.
Find your joy. Find your joy today. Find your joy and send it to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org or write it in our WhatsApp. We want to know your joy. Sure.
One thing that's on my mind, and I'll try to be as short as possible, and maybe I can expand on this tomorrow, is that like something I have to remind myself is that it's my responsibility to do it, you know, to like find the inspiring people, to go out there where we live in a world where it's like, you know, because I'm speaking for myself, where I can be like, I'm uninspired, so I'm just gonna lay on the couch all day and like hide under a blanket, you know, like that's how I am sometimes. And it's
We
like,
went from find your joy to I'm gonna go hide under a blanket all day because that's
I
just
get
where I'm
very
at.
like introspective in my shell. And I always have to remind myself, I'm like, wait a minute, like we live in the internet age. There's Zoom, there's people out there giving so much kata that, like, you know, it might be inspiring. I don't know, so much stories and philosophy about Krishna and Bhagavad Gita and etc. And so it's like, I think just that reminder that like it's my responsibility to go and find that nectar, you know, and it's out there. It's out there if I just go look for it. And, you know, maybe I'll find some that is not quite matching and some that is not quite matching my mood, but then you eventually will find something that you're like, wow, this is really it, and this is really inspiring, and I've got something, you know. So I think that's just a nice reminder that I'm walking away with, that it's our responsibility.
I love.
I feel like I'm always giving like the slightly harder, like, guys, let's be real. Like, so I'm really glad that you said that. I didn't have to say it because it's out there and free.
It's free.
There are so many people who are like, oh, but I don't have time, nor do I have money, nor do I have any of these things, and I need all this to have my spiritual practice. I'm like, or you don't, because it's free. There's so much of it out there that's free. There's a whole database that we've been reading from online that is free.
And I think something so interesting, sorry, but I feel like this opened up a can of worms. We're not going to get into it, and we're not going to get into it because we're ending. But I think
we're gonna do a double episode today. Like, you know, sometimes in TV shows you used to have like a double Seinfeld episode. We're going to a double episode.
I was just gonna say that, like, it's so strange how modern spirituality in many contexts has been equated with like material luxury, in a sense. You know, it's like my spiritual life needs to look like I have all the right spiritual clothes, and I go to all the right places, and, you know, all these courses and all these things to like better me. And something I really love about bhakti is that so much of this, you know, amazing philosophy is out there, like Achyuta was saying, and it's out there for free. You know, there's so many inspiring people out there just sharing. And so it behooves us to find where those sources are.
It does behoove us. Thank you, Gandalf. I love what you guys said. I don't have anything to add to that. Finding joy, taking responsibility for filling my cup. And also, I love what Achyuta said about just really looking at like, what are the things I so easily cut out of my day, or I say I don't have time for? And maybe I can choose to not have time for something else. Maybe I can choose to not have time for something else. So that's my takeaway. I love you guys. So glad that you're here. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to our live audience. Thank you to all those listening out there in podcast land. We love you, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.